Some letters aren't meant to be opened. They're meant to destroy the life you thought you understood. I never believed a single piece of paper could make the most feared man in New York forget how to breathe. Until the afternoon my 6-year-old daughter walked into his world carrying an envelope with my handwriting on it. 3 days earlier, I had kissed Lily's forehead before school, smoothed the loose strand of her blonde hair behind her ear, and reminded her of the one promise she'd memorized years ago without ever knowing why. If Mommy ever disappeared, she was to take the white envelope from the blue box beneath my bed and give it to one man. Only one. She had repeated his name back to me with the innocent seriousness only children possess. Vincent Romano. She had asked who he was. I smiled the way mothers do when the truth would only steal a child's peace. I told her he was someone who once made me believe the world could still surprise me. Then I changed the subject and packed her peanut butter sandwich before she could ask another question. I prayed she would never need that envelope. Life rarely listens to prayers. The ballroom inside the Romano Foundation shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers as New York's wealthiest donors applauded another generous speech about helping children. Expensive tuxedos, elegant gowns, polished marble floors, and the quiet confidence that only money seemed to buy surrounded the room. At the center of it all stood Vincent Romano. 6'3". Tailored black suit. Dark hair brushed neatly away from a face the newspapers called untouchable. People saw a billionaire philanthropist. Others whispered another title after lowering their voices. Mafia Boss. He accepted handshakes without smiling, answered questions with measured patience, and somehow controlled every corner of the room without raising his voice. Security surrounded him, though nobody noticed unless they knew where to look. Lily noticed none of it. She simply clutched the small white envelope against her yellow cardigan and wandered through a forest of adults whose conversations floated far above her head. One guard stepped forward and gently blocked her path. "Sweetheart, where are your parents?" She looked up with wide blue eyes. "I need to give this to Mr. Vincent Romano." The guard offered a polite smile. "That's not possible." But before he could guide her away, Vincent glanced toward the small commotion. His eyes settled on the little girl for only a second before he lifted one finger. "Let her come." The room seemed to pause. Lily walked carefully across the polished floor until she stood in front of him. She barely reached his waist. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then she held out the envelope with both hands. "Mommy told me to give you this letter if she ever disappeared. She said only you would understand." Vincent accepted it slowly. His expression remained unreadable until he noticed the handwriting. His fingers stopped moving. The color quietly drained from his face. Around him, conversations continued, glasses clinked together, cameras flashed, but none of it seemed to exist anymore. He opened the envelope with unusual care and unfolded the single sheet inside. The first sentence was only 8 words long. "If you're reading this, Vincent, I ran out of time." And for the first time in more than a decade, the man everyone believed feared nothing looked as though the past had finally found him. Vincent read the first line 3 times before the words finally settled into something his mind could accept. His hand, steady through boardroom negotiations, courtroom testimonies, and moments that had tested every ounce of his discipline, trembled almost imperceptibly. Lily stood quietly in front of him, still holding the stuffed rabbit tucked beneath one arm, completely unaware that the room around them had disappeared inside the man's thoughts. The letter was short, but every sentence carried the weight of 12 years. "Vincent, if Lily is standing in front of you, then I could not protect this secret any longer. Please do not let her believe I abandoned her. I have lived every day hoping she would never have to find you. If that day has come, then it means someone else already has." His heartbeat slowed instead of racing. That was always how his body reacted when something truly dangerous appeared. Calm replaced emotion. Focus replaced shock. But beneath that familiar control, another feeling surfaced, one he had buried so deeply he had almost forgotten its existence. Emily. He had spent years convincing himself that she had chosen to disappear. He had repeated that lie often enough that it eventually sounded like truth. It had been easier than accepting the possibility that something beyond his control had taken her away. His advisors had told him she betrayed him. Investigators found empty apartments, disconnected phone numbers, and bank accounts drained overnight. Every trail ended with the same conclusion. She left. Vincent eventually stopped asking questions because every answer hurt more than silence. Until now. He lowered the letter and looked at the little girl standing only a few feet away. Her blue eyes watched him without fear. They were not Emily's eyes. They were lighter, brighter. But the way she tilted her head while waiting for an answer struck him harder than anything written on the page. Emily used to do exactly the same thing whenever she believed he was thinking too much. A memory slipped through the cracks before he could stop it. A rainy afternoon 12 years earlier. Emily laughing as she balanced 2 paper coffee cups while pretending not to notice the puddles soaking her sneakers. You always act like the whole world depends on your next decision, Vincent. Sometimes you should just drink your coffee before it gets cold. He had smiled then. A real smile. One so rare that Emily teased him about charging admission whenever it appeared. The memory vanished as quickly as it came. Vincent folded the letter with almost painful precision and slipped it inside his jacket. He crouched until he was eye level with Lily. "Where is your mother now?" Lily looked down at her shoes before answering. "I do not know. She hugged me this morning before school and told me to be brave. Then she said you would know what to do. Did she tell you where she was going?" Lily slowly shook her head. "She only said not to be scared because good people always find each other again." Vincent closed his eyes for one brief second. Emily had always believed that. Even when he never could. Around them, the charity gala continued almost normally, but his security chief had already noticed the change in his expression. Michael approached quietly and stopped beside him. "Sir, should I clear the room?" Vincent stood without taking his eyes off Lily. "No. I want every security camera from the last 48 hours. Every entrance. Every street surrounding this building. Find out how she got here." Michael nodded immediately. Vincent spoke again before he could leave. "And Michael, find Emily Carter. Do not search for the woman everyone thinks disappeared 12 years ago. Search for the mother who knew this day was coming." The black sport utility vehicle moved silently through Manhattan while rain tapped gently against the windows, soft enough to blur the city lights into ribbons of gold and white. Lily sat in the back seat wrapped in a warm blanket one of the house staff had found for her. She had fallen asleep less than 10 minutes after leaving the gala, her small hand still clutching the stuffed rabbit as if letting go might somehow make everything worse. Vincent looked at her through the rearview mirror longer than he intended. Children usually cried around strangers. They asked endless questions. They reached for familiar faces. Lily had done none of those things. She had accepted the silence with a quiet courage that reminded him painfully of someone else. By the time they arrived at the Romano estate, every member of his security team already knew one rule. The little girl was to be treated like family. No exceptions. Maria, the housekeeper who had worked for Vincent's family for nearly 20 years, greeted them at the front entrance. Her expression softened the moment she saw Lily sleeping. "Purr, sweetheart," she whispered. Vincent carefully lifted the child into his arms. She barely stirred, resting her head against his shoulder with complete trust. This simple gesture unsettled him more than any threat ever could. He carried her upstairs himself, and placed her gently inside one of the guest bedrooms overlooking the gardens. The room had once belonged to visiting relatives, untouched for years except for regular cleaning. Tonight it suddenly felt too empty. Maria quietly placed a nightlight on the dresser before covering Lily with a soft quilt. "She will be all right for tonight," she said. Vincent nodded without answering. As he stepped back into a hallway, Michael was already waiting with a tablet filled with surveillance reports. We traced her route. She arrived alone by subway from Brooklyn. Every transfer matches the security cameras. She followed handwritten directions folded inside her backpack. Vincent reached for the tablet. There were photographs from station entrances, sidewalks, and traffic cameras. In every image, Lily walked alone with determined little steps, stopping only once to ask a police officer for directions before continuing toward the Foundation building. She had crossed nearly 12 miles through one of the busiest cities in America because her mother asked her to trust one man. Vincent swallowed slowly. Did anyone follow her? Michael shook his head. Not that we can confirm. But there is something else. He enlarged one image captured outside a neighborhood bakery less than an hour before Lily entered the subway. A woman wearing a baseball cap stood across the street watching the little girl walk away. Her face remained hidden beneath the brim, but Vincent immediately noticed one detail. Around her neck hung a small silver compass pendant. His chest tightened. Emily never wore expensive jewelry. She always said a compass mattered more than diamonds because it reminded people where home was. She had worn that pendant every day they were together. Vincent stared at the blurry image until the edges became meaningless. She was alive. She had watched Lily leave. She had been close enough to stop everything, yet she chose not to. Why? Michael spoke carefully. We lost her less than 30 seconds later when a delivery truck blocked the camera. After that, nothing. Vincent looked back toward the closed bedroom door where Lily slept peacefully for the first time in hours. Then he unfolded the letter again. This time he noticed something he had missed before. Along the bottom edge of the page, barely visible beneath the signature, Emily had drawn a tiny compass with one point marked by a single handwritten word. Harbor. It was not an ending. It was a direction. Vincent left the estate before sunrise with only Michael riding beside him. The streets were nearly empty, washed clean by the steady rain that had lingered through the night. Harbor could have meant 100 different places around New York, but Emily never chose words carelessly. If she had written harbor instead of an address, she expected him to remember something no one else would. 40 minutes later, the black sport utility vehicle rolled to a stop near the old South Street seaport. Tourists filled the area during summer afternoons, but at dawn only fishermen, delivery workers, and early joggers moved along the waterfront. The East River reflected the gray morning sky while ferries drifted quietly through the mist. Vincent stepped onto the wooden pier and closed his eyes for a moment. 12 years disappeared. He was no longer the man everyone feared. He was simply a young man standing beside a woman holding 2 paper cups of coffee. Emily had laughed when a gust of wind nearly carried away the napkins. You always choose the loudest restaurants and the biggest meetings, she had teased. But when you actually want to think, you always come here. He opened his eyes. The old bench was still there. Weathered. Faded. Forgotten by almost everyone except him. Michael watched from a respectful distance as Vincent slowly approached it. Beneath the bench, hidden behind one loose wooden support, something caught the morning light. It was a small metal box no larger than a paperback novel. Time had covered it with dust and salt, but the brass lock remained intact. Vincent recognized it instantly. Years ago, Emily had jokingly called it their emergency mailbox. If life ever became too complicated, they would leave messages there instead of trusting phones or emails. They had never actually needed it. At least, that was what Vincent believed. His fingers hesitated before lifting the lid. Inside rested a faded photograph, a small silver key attached to a blue ribbon, and another envelope bearing his name in Emily's familiar handwriting. He unfolded the second letter with the same careful hands. Vincent, if you found this, then you remembered our place. That means there is still hope. I could never explain everything in one letter because too many eyes might read it before yours. I need you to know one thing before you search for me. I never stopped loving you. I disappeared because staying would have destroyed the future our daughter deserved. Every decision I made afterward belonged to her, not to me. Do not waste time blaming yourself. There will be time for questions if we are lucky enough to meet again. For now, follow the key. Trust no one who claims they already know the truth. Vincent lowered the letter and stared at the silver key resting in his palm. It was old enough to belong to a locker, a storage box, or perhaps an apartment he had never known existed. The blue ribbon tied around it seemed ordinary until he noticed tiny numbers embroidered into one corner. Pier 17. Locker 248. Michael stepped closer after reading the expression on Vincent's face. Another clue? Vincent nodded once without looking away from the key. No. Emily never leaves clues. She leaves decisions. Somewhere nearby, a ferry horn echoed across the harbor as morning sunlight finally pushed through the clouds. For the first time in 12 years, Vincent no longer felt like he was chasing a ghost. He was following a woman who had carefully planned every step, trusting that one day he would remember exactly who she believed he could become. Locker 248 sat at the end of a narrow hallway beneath Pier 17, surrounded by rows of aging steel doors that looked as though they had been forgotten years ago. The attendant barely glanced at Vincent after seeing the silver key. He simply nodded toward the back wall and returned to reading his newspaper. Everything about the place felt ordinary, almost disappointingly so. Emily had always understood that the safest hiding places were the ones nobody considered important. Vincent slipped the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, as though someone had maintained it all these years. Inside rested a plain canvas backpack, a sealed manila envelope, and a small wooden music box decorated with carved wildflowers. He recognized the music box immediately. He had bought it from a tiny craft shop during a weekend trip upstate because Emily once admitted she had collected music boxes as a little girl. She had laughed when he apologized for choosing something so simple. The expensive gifts had never impressed her. Thoughtfulness always did. He carefully opened the backpack first. Folded inside were school records for Lily, pediatric medical checkups, birthday photographs, drawings covered with bright crayons, and dozens of handwritten notes describing milestones only a devoted mother would treasure. First lost tooth. First bicycle ride without training wheels. First piano recital. First day of kindergarten. Vincent slowly turned each page. He had missed every one of those moments. Not because he had chosen to, but because he had never known they existed. A single photograph slipped onto the floor. It showed Emily sitting beside Lily on a park bench, both laughing at something outside the camera. Emily looked older naturally, but her smile remained exactly the same. On the back she had written, "She laughs the way you do when you forget people are watching." His throat tightened. Michael quietly picked up the manila envelope and handed it to him without saying a word. Inside lay a birth certificate. Vincent read the names once. Then again. Father, Vincent Anthony Romano. Mother, Emily Grace Carter. The document had been issued 6 years earlier but never filed through any public registry connected to his name. Emily had never erased him from Lily's life. She had simply hidden the truth where only she could protect it. Beneath the certificate rested another handwritten page. If you have reached this point, then you finally know why I could never tell you. The fewer people who knew Lily's identity, the safer she remained. I trusted only one person to help me disappear. I believed he was protecting us. I was wrong. If someone learns that Lily came to you, they will begin searching before long. Do not look backward. Look beside you. The danger has always walked closer than either of us realized. Vincent read the last sentence twice before folding the letter. Beside you. Not behind you. Not ahead of you. Emily was warning him about someone still inside his circle. Someone who had earned his trust years ago. Michael's phone vibrated softly. He answered, listened for only a few seconds, then his expression changed. Sir, Maria just called from the estate. Lily is safe, but someone delivered a package to the front gate this morning. There was no return address. Inside was only a child's compass identical to the one drawn on Emily's letter. Attached to it was a single handwritten note. We know where she is. Vincent closed the locker door without another word. For 12 years Emily had stayed one step ahead. Whoever had left that message had just revealed something even more important. They were finally trying to catch up. Vincent returned to the estate just before noon. The iron gates opened without hesitation, but the familiar sense of security no longer greeted him. Every camera, every guard, every carefully designed layer of protection suddenly felt incomplete. Someone had known exactly where to leave the package. Someone had known Lily was inside. Maria met him in the entrance hall, holding the small brass compass inside a clear evidence bag. It looked almost identical to the drawing Emily had hidden at the bottom of her letter. Only one detail separated it from an ordinary keepsake. On the reverse side, someone had engraved a single date. October 14th. Vincent frowned. That date meant nothing to him. Maria lowered her voice. Lily noticed something before I did. She said her mother used to circle that day on every calendar they owned. Vincent looked toward the living room where Lily sat on the carpet drawing with colored pencils, completely unaware of the storm surrounding her. She looked up the moment he entered and smiled with the effortless trust only children could offer. Mr. Vincent, I made your suit blue because Mommy said blue makes people look kinder. He almost smiled back. Almost. Instead, he knelt beside her drawing. Why did your mother circle October 14th? Lily shrugged while carefully coloring the roof of a tiny house. She always called it our lucky day. We ate pancakes for dinner every year, even if it was a school night. She never told me why. Vincent stared at the picture she was drawing. There were 3 people standing in front of the house. A little girl. A woman with long blonde hair. And a tall man in a dark blue suit. The faces were only simple circles with smiling mouths, but the image stole the air from his lungs. Who is he? Lily answered as though the question were obvious. That is you. Mommy always said families should be drawn together, even when they live far apart. Vincent looked away before the child could notice the emotion in his eyes. Michael entered carrying a thin folder. I checked the engraving. October 14th is not connected to any business record or public event. But I searched our archives from 12 years ago. There was one private appointment on your calendar that day. It had been deleted later, but the backup server still kept the timestamp. Vincent reached for the folder. The location printed across the page made his pulse slow. St. Anne's Chapel. A small stone church overlooking the Hudson River. Emily had loved the place because it welcomed anyone seeking quiet, whether they belonged to a congregation or not. They had planned to meet there one autumn afternoon after she finished teaching a community art class. Vincent remembered waiting inside for almost 2 hours before receiving the call that changed everything. Someone claimed Emily had disappeared with confidential information and left the city voluntarily. He had believed the evidence presented to him because every document appeared genuine. Every witness confirmed the same story. He had never questioned why the church itself remained empty that afternoon. Michael studied him carefully. Do you think someone intercepted her before she arrived? Vincent answered without hesitation. No. I think someone made certain I never looked for her there again. His phone vibrated. An unknown number. He accepted the call without speaking. For several seconds only silence answered. Then a familiar female voice, older but unmistakable, whispered just 4 words before the line disconnected. Trust the music box, Vincent. Do not trust anyone else. He stared at the silent phone while every memory he had buried began fitting together in ways he had never imagined. Vincent waited until Lily had fallen asleep before carrying the wooden music box into his private study. The house was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that made every ticking clock sound louder than it should. He placed the box beneath a reading lamp and studied every inch of its worn surface. Years ago he had admired the carved wildflowers without paying attention to anything else. Emily always noticed details he overlooked. Trust the music box. The words echoed in his mind. He gently turned the tiny brass key. A familiar melody floated through the room, soft and slow, the same lullaby Emily used to hum whenever life became too heavy for words. Nothing happened. The song ended. Vincent listened again. This time he noticed something unusual. One note sounded slightly different, almost muted. He carefully lifted the velvet lining inside the music box. Hidden beneath it was a folded strip of yellowed paper no wider than his finger. Michael leaned closer as Vincent unfolded it. Instead of a message, there were only 4 names written in Emily's handwriting. 3 had been crossed out with neat blue ink. The 4th remained untouched. Daniel Mercer. Vincent did not speak for several seconds. Michael frowned. Daniel retired almost 10 years ago. He handled financial audits for the foundation before joining your executive office. Vincent slowly looked toward the window. Daniel had been one of the few people who knew almost every change in his schedule during those years. He had arranged meetings, managed confidential travel plans, and even confirmed Vincent's appointment at St. Anne's Chapel the afternoon Emily disappeared. Michael immediately reached for his phone. "I will bring him in." Vincent raised one hand. "No. If Emily left his name hidden for 12 years, she wanted me to see what he does when he believes nobody is watching. We watch first. We move later." Before Michael could answer, another voice interrupted from the doorway. "Mr. Vincent?" Both men turned. Lily stood there in oversized pajamas, rubbing one sleepy eye while holding her stuffed rabbit. "I could not sleep. I heard the song." Vincent's expression softened. He walked over and knelt beside her. "Did your mother ever play this music box?" Lily nodded. "Every birthday. She always cried a little when the song ended, but she smiled before I could ask why." Vincent gently brushed a loose strand of hair away from her face. "Did she ever mention Daniel Mercer?" Lily tilted her head, thinking carefully. "No. But I know that last name. Mommy once got a letter with Mercer written on it. She burned it in the kitchen sink after reading it. She looked scared for the first time I can remember." Vincent exchanged a silent glance with Michael. That was no coincidence. Lily suddenly reached into the pocket of her pajamas and pulled out a folded piece of construction paper. "I almost forgot. Mommy told me not to open this unless I remembered something important. I remembered after hearing the song." She handed it to Vincent with complete confidence. Inside was a child's drawing made years earlier. A little girl held the hands of two smiling adults while standing beside a white lighthouse overlooking the ocean. Across the top, Emily had written one sentence in careful block letters. "If Lily remembers the lighthouse, it means she is finally ready to meet me." Vincent looked at the picture, then back at Lily. "Have you ever been to a lighthouse?" She smiled with sudden excitement. "Yes. There was one with red flowers and a bell that rang every afternoon. Mommy said it was the only place where nobody would think to look for us because everyone believed we had never been there." Vincent folded the drawing with extraordinary care. For the first time, Emily had not left him a question. She had given him a destination. The drive took them nearly 3 hours north along the coast, leaving the noise of New York behind 1 mile at a time. Lily spent most of the trip looking out the window, quietly counting red barns, sailboats, and flocks of birds whenever they appeared. Vincent drove the final stretch himself after dismissing the rest of the convoy several miles earlier. Emily had trusted this place for a reason. Arriving with a line of black vehicles would only announce that they had come. The narrow road ended beside a weathered white lighthouse overlooking the Atlantic. Wildflowers swayed in the ocean breeze exactly as they had in Lily's drawing. A bronze bell hung near the entrance, gently ringing each afternoon as waves rolled against the rocks below. Everything looked ordinary, peaceful, hidden from the world. Lily smiled before the vehicle had completely stopped. "I remember this place. Mommy bought blueberry muffins from a little bakery down the road. She always let me ring the bell once before we left." Vincent looked around carefully. There were only a handful of small cottages scattered along the shoreline, each separated by gardens and white fences. No cameras. No guards. No walls. It was the kind of place Emily had always loved because nobody cared who you had been somewhere else. They only cared whether you waved good morning. An elderly woman stepped out of a nearby flower shop carrying a watering can. The moment she saw Lily, her eyes widened with unmistakable recognition. "Oh my goodness. You came back." She hurried closer before stopping in front of Vincent. "You must be the man Emily always hoped would find his way here one day." Vincent felt the words settle heavily inside him. "You know Emily?" The woman smiled gently. "Around here she is Miss Grace. She teaches children to paint every Saturday morning in the old community hall. Kindest soul I have met in years." She looked toward the small harbor where colorful fishing boats rested against the docks. "She should still be there unless the class ended early." Lily was already pulling lightly on Vincent's hand. Come on. Mommy says being late is rude. They walked together along the stone path lined with red flowers until laughter drifted through the open windows of a small white building. Vincent stopped just outside the doorway. Inside, nearly a dozen children sat around wooden tables covered with paint, brushes, and bright sheets of paper. At the front of the room stood a woman wearing a simple blue sweater with her blonde hair tied loosely behind her neck. She leaned over to help a little boy mix green and yellow into the perfect shade for the tree he wanted to paint. There were faint silver strands in her hair now. A few gentle lines framed her smile. But Vincent knew her before she even turned around. Some people changed with time. Emily had simply become more herself. Lily let go of Vincent's hand and ran forward. Mommy. Emily looked up instinctively. The paintbrush slipped from her fingers and rolled across the table. Her eyes found Lily first. Then they slowly lifted to Vincent standing silently in the doorway. For several endless seconds nobody moved. The children continued painting, completely unaware that two lives had just collided after 12 years of silence. Emily's eyes filled with tears she no longer tried to hide. Vincent could not remember the last time his own heartbeat felt this loud. Finally she whispered the words she had carried for more than a decade. You remembered the lighthouse. Vincent took one slow step forward. I remembered you. Emily dismissed the children with warm smiles and quiet encouragement, thanking each family before locking the door behind the last visitor. The room fell silent except for the distant rhythm of waves meeting the rocky shore and the soft ringing of the lighthouse bell carried by the afternoon breeze. Lily slipped her small hands into both of theirs without hesitation, as though this had always been the way the world was supposed to look. Emily glanced down at their joined hands before looking back at Vincent. I wanted her first memory of you to be kindness, not fear. That was the only future I knew how to protect. Vincent studied her face, searching for anger, disappointment, anything that might explain 12 empty years. Instead, he found only exhaustion softened by hope. Why did you never tell me she was my daughter? Emily took a slow breath. Because someone inside your world learned about my pregnancy before you did. Daniel Mercer convinced me he was helping us escape. He showed me documents, bank transfers, witness statements, everything needed to make me believe that powerful people wanted to use Lily to reach you. Later I realized he had been feeding both of us different versions of the same lie. You believed I abandoned you. I believed disappearing was the only way to keep our child safe. Vincent lowered his eyes. I should have looked harder. Emily gently shook her head. No. You should have been able to trust the people standing beside you. That was never your failure alone. Lily looked between them with the innocent curiosity only a child possessed. So nobody was mad anymore? Emily smiled through fresh tears. I think we were never really mad. We were just very lost. Lily nodded as though that explanation solved everything and wandered toward the window to watch a sailboat crossing the water. Vincent reached into his jacket and removed every letter Emily had written. The paper had become slightly worn from being unfolded so many times over the past 2 days. I carried these everywhere because I was afraid they might disappear again. Emily accepted the letters carefully, running her fingers across the familiar handwriting before returning them to him. Keep them. They belong to both of us now. Outside, the lighthouse bell rang once more. Vincent looked through the window at the quiet town surrounding them. No towering buildings. No endless meetings. No constant pressure to prove strength every hour of every day. Only neighbors who greeted one another by name, and children who measured wealth by how many seashells they found before sunset. I built an empire because I thought control could protect the people I loved, he said quietly. Emily stepped beside him. And what do you believe now? Vincent watched Lily laughing as she chased a butterfly across the grass outside the hall. For years he had measured success in contracts, influence, and victories that disappeared almost as quickly as they arrived. None of them compared to one little girl smiling without fear. I think peace is harder to build than power, he answered. But it lasts longer. Emily slipped her hand into his, not as strangers beginning again, but as two people finally released from a story either of them had chosen. Months later, the Romano Foundation quietly opened a community arts and education center beside the lighthouse, directed by Emily, and dedicated to helping children discover hope through creativity. Vincent visited every weekend, usually wearing a simple blue sweater instead of an expensive suit because Lily insisted blue made him look kinder. Visitors often assumed they were an ordinary family enjoying a quiet coastal town. Nobody guessed how many sacrifices had brought them there, and none of them needed to know. Sometimes the greatest victories are never announced to the world. They are simply lived one peaceful day at a time by people who finally find their way home.